What's up, guys? I'm actually shooting this intro after like 3 or 4 weeks of shooting all the work that you're about to see. It's a sort of mishmash of a lot of different stuff on a lot of different bikes, right? I haven't really had the opportunity to work on one bike only. Instead, you're gonna see us working on our 1972 CB175, everything from cleaning up the fuel tank, getting the carbs dialed in, getting it started, maybe getting it started. You're gonna see us getting the Virago parts powder coated and finally making some progress with that. We're doing work on my cousin's Yamaha XS750, like replacing the handlebars. So a ton of different stuff jumping all around, but I'll try to keep you up to speed as we go. Leave comments down below if you can see that I missed anything. Thanks for watching.
Well, what do you say we get to work? And the first thing we start with is this CB175 starting clutch. It made that horrible grinding noise, it just wasn't catching. Here you can see all the little springed cams and how they're sort of sticking, right? Like you want to be able to push it in and then just have a lot of spring pressure, just shoot it right out. That way it can really grab onto the sprocket. I figured, you know what, I might as well just order a bunch of new parts, clean it out really well. The issue though is that I ordered a cheap set off eBay instead of the stock Honda things. And this is what you get with the cheap stuff off eBay. The springs were so twisted together that to pull them apart, they stretched out and pretty much broke. So back to the drawing board, had to wait another week or two for the parts to come in from Honda, but I got them all in. For Christmas, my wife got me a blacksmithing certificate, so I actually forged this knife myself at the blacksmith just as a general shop utility knife. It's awesome. You're going to see me use it all the time, so that's what it is. So here I am putting all the new parts after 1 or 2 weeks of waiting in the starting clutch, and let's see if it works, right? I mean, it'll work, right? I mean, yeah, of course it'll work. Now, when you're tightening down the clutch basket, they make a special clutch holder wrench tool thing. But on the magnetos, I like to use these rubber strap wrenches. These don't get a ton of torque, maybe 30 foot-pounds or something. So the rubber strap wrench is perfectly adequate to hold it still while you tighten it up. For the inside of the tank, I used the Pour 15 tank sealer kit, and I think it turned out really nicely. It wasn't super hard to use. I prepped it like the instructions said, and I think it'll hold up for a really long time. Now let's look at how the paint on the tank looks before. You can see all this like grime in the paint. Now I don't know if there's any clear coat left at all really, but if so, it is way damaged. So much so that even with simple green wiping it down like this, it pretty much didn't do anything. So I started with 1500 grit sandpaper, went to 2000, and then went to 3000. That was probably a mistake. I think 1500 was just too aggressive. As you're going to see a little bit later on, I started to take down a little bit too much of the paint, even into that black and white strip. I just used a buffing pad to finish it off. Now it came out shiny. I mean, this looks nice, right? But you'll see that it did take off some of that black and white stripe. Check it out.
Our CB175 is pretty much all back together and ready to test start. Now, we've had a few setbacks. Sure, you know who hasn't? For instance, when I threw away the stock ignition switch, the key was in it, and I forgot that that key also unlocks the seat. So I had to entirely remove the seat lock, and now it's just sort of resting there. But you know, we're gonna have our setback, sure. Another setback. Just to check the electrical system, I turned it on and tried to start it without any gas in it or anything. And it still makes the starting issue noise.
They ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
But we're gonna have some setbacks, big deal. Some other setbacks is that the electrical system is like finicky, like sometimes everything comes on, sometimes it doesn't. I think there's like a intermittent short somewhere or something, but this stuff is gonna happen. So, hey, I mean, why don't we just dump some fuel in it, see if it runs. All right, so I just cracked the throttle a tiny little bit and it popped right off. Sure, it only runs with a little bit of throttle because I forget if the choke's on or off and the idle screws probably aren't set right. But it started right up. And just to put this into perspective, I think in my shop right now it's like 32 degrees, maybe just a tad above freezing in Fahrenheit, of course. So, all right, I'll take it. You know, we've had our setbacks. I'll take it. All right, I think I got it. It idles at about 1200 and it revs up nice and snappy, falls back down really good. You'll hear how it sounds now.
Now we can turn our attention to the 1979 Yamaha XS750 that we're building for my cousin Lizzie right here. You can see she's using the blacksmith forged utility knife from earlier in the video as well to take off the old grips. Is it overkill to remove grips with that giant knife? Maybe.
Clutch lever?
Maybe. Either way, once the handlebars come off, and it's pretty simple to do, it doesn't take too long, then the hard part and the time-consuming part is fitting on the new bars. We're using these tracker-style handlebars. It's sort of a mishmash build, right? So a little bit cafe, a little bit tracker, but these things will look really cool.
You can see the new handlebars on here, and they're looking pretty sweet, but as kind of suspected, and what you have to do a lot of times when the bars are a different height, is get new cables. You can see this clutch cable over here. It's way too long, and by the time you bother like rerouting it and stuff, it just is really janky. You can see all this extra throttle cable as well. So we're gonna need to build new throttle and clutch cables. And we're ordering stainless steel brake lines anyway, so that's fine. But as far as the rest of the bars go, I mean, that's pretty much it. So we're gonna bob the front fender, or chop it down at least. So to do it, the sort of easiest method is to mark how far you want, like what the width you want. And then what I like to do is, as long as you want to keep this same profile, you chop just the front part off, and then take this front profile to the spot that you want, trace it, and then you have a profile to cut along. And then your finished product will be nice and sort of, you know, finished looking, just like the stock one. Whereas if you just try to cut a radius around, it's gonna look janky. So this way you sort of get the nicest finished product.
Now you don't need any crazy tools for this, but you do need to be comfortable and proficient with an angle grinder. The angle grinder can be a really dangerous tool when in the wrong hands, so just be sure you feel comfortable with it and you have enough experience, and then you can sort of one-hand it and it comes out
sweet.
Awesome. Check this out.
I like it a lot, cut like that.
Yeah, it looks really sweet. Got some progress updates for you. The Virago is still in the works. A lot of people have been asking in the comment section, hey, what's up with the Virago? Where's the Virago? We were making a lot of videos there for a while, and then it just sort of stopped. Well, part of it is that we're sort of waiting on powder coating and painting. I'm gonna paint the tank myself, but for powder coating, as you guys might know, it's really expensive, and a lot of parts, including the frame and wheels and everything, needed to be powder coated. So I sort of wanted to like space it out a little bit. But I got the first sort of group of parts to pick up from the powder coater. They're in the trunk of the car right now, and I'll give you some updates on all the other projects going on, like 3 or 4 in the shop. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Now, I'm not going to give away any spoilers for the tank colors, but remember we did the engine, and the engine is mostly this sort of satin black with the polished aluminum fins. The side covers are going to be polished. So the first bunch of parts that I dropped off, oh, here's the dog Beans. The first bunch of parts that I dropped off is the frame and a bunch of other sort of accessories, and as you can see, they are this really, really sharp looking sort of matte satin black. Guys, look at how good all this stuff turned out. This is insane. Here we have the subframe, the main frame section right here, the rear swing arm section. These are the sort of foot peg holders that are now the rear set holders. You can see where I TIG plugged those lower holes. And now, I mean, from 2 feet back, you'd never even know. Check out all of these other little parts. I mean, I dropped a lot off at the guy, and he's been doing it for 50 years. Those are his words, not mine. He knows what he's doing. I mean, look at how absolutely perfect
all of these lines are. Even this smaller stuff that is really hard to do, right? Like it's just hard to do to make sure that you're spraying in everything. Let me take the bag off this battery box and show you. Check this out, where he not only made sure to tape all the threads perfectly, but notice all the little creaks and cracks and crevices are all just done perfectly on the inside. Every corner is just fully coated. It is beautiful, and I really love this black. Now here's the problem with shows like this, right, is you watch all this stuff and you want to do it yourself, but nobody ever tells you where to do it or how much it costs. Hey, Beans, come back in here. Good boy. So let me put this into perspective. There's a lot of powder coating guys out there. There's a lot of powder coating guys that are just sort of doing it in their shop for extra money, and some are good, some aren't good. I go to somebody who's been in business for a long time. This is an old guy who's done it for 50 years. He charges what he wants because he knows he can get it. Honestly, he doesn't need my business, right? Like, he just doesn't need it. He deals in cash only because he doesn't need your service charge charged by the bank for your debit or credit card. And he does an awesome job. For all this stuff, it was $550. Now remember, powder coating is a big process, right? He has to take everything. He has to sandblast it all down to bare steel, clean all the sand out, clean the metal. He even goes over everything and fixes any little cracks or imperfections and welds that he sees. Then he has to spray it all and then bake it in an oven at like 400 or so degrees, whatever it is, and then let it cure. So it's a labor-intensive process. You're really paying a lot, not just in materials, but for labor as well. So $550 for all these little pieces, brackets and everything, plus that big frame, which is probably the biggest ticket item. I call that worth it. So that's the update on the Virago, but what about all the other million projects around here? Well, here's the Honda Hornet, the 919, that is good to go. If you watched one of the previous videos, I made a how to replace the clutch cable video on this bike. So this has a new clutch cable, filled up the tires, adjusted the chain slack, and this is good to go for the season. Over here we have my cousin Lizzie's Yamaha XS 750. It's coming along really well. Right now we're working on the handlebars, getting new handlebars, controls, cables, and everything like that. These videos are kind of few and far between because we work on it here and there.
Now, what a lot of people don't realize about building all these custom motorcycles from the ground up is that a lot of the bolts and nuts and everything on these old motorcycles are all rusty and grimy. So if you're building a show bike, right, if you're doing all this work to something, it would really suck to put on rusty hardware. So here, what you're seeing just a few seconds of is the hours and hours and hours that I will spend going through all my baggies and cleaning and polishing every single nut and bolt on the entire motorcycle. That way, you're not using old, grimy, rusty hardware on a brand newly built motorcycle. Here's a good example of a before and after. So this is what a lot of hardware will look like. Notice it's in pretty good shape, right? It's just got some dirt, grime, and some surface rust. Now this is what it can look like afterwards. You see how with just the brass wire wheel there, it gets this nice brushed finish. Now I thought about just leaving you hanging with that explanation instead of showing you lots of different things before and after, but then I realized why you watch these videos. So here you go for your viewing pleasure. Before and after. Part of the rear drive before. You can see all that white oxidation on there. And here's the after. Now how about all these tiny little valve cover screws? They turn out great. Here's a before and after. Really dirty and greasy rear drive hub nuts. Here's a good one, the kickstand little pivot bolt and spring. And the last one that I'll show you out of the hours and hours of bolts I'm gonna have to do are these engine mount bolts, just because these are so dirty and grimy that even putting them in the ultrasonic cleaner wouldn't get all this off like the brass wire wheel will. And here you go. I can't thank you guys enough for staying tuned all the way through like this, updating on all of our projects, seeing where we're at. I'm really excited that we're finishing up some, just digging into some others, and almost at the most exciting time of a build, and that's the final assembly on our Virago. So stay tuned for the next one. We'll see you then. Thanks.